Take a look at the format package a little bit. So we just saw some of that. Like we've been using format println, and you can look at that package by going there. And package format implements formatted I/O with functions analogous to C's printf and scanf. The format verbs are derived from C's but are simpler. So here are those things. We already kind of talked about them. And print, scan, sprint. And you can take a look at the different ones and see kind of like, what the documentation looks like. And so when you look at this documentation, func, print, the capital P tells you, okay, that's accessible outside this format package, which we know because we use it. And then these are the parameters it takes. The ... means it takes unlimited number of parameters. Interface is of any type. That's what that is, and we'll understand that more later. And then it returns an int and an array. So those are the returns out here to the right. This one takes a string and then any other variables of any type, an unlimited number of them. And so the formatting string is going to be the verb. What's the verb? And then this one's just like print, except it gives a line. So we already talked about what the ... dots mean, but the dots before something are for parameters, and the dots after something are for arguments. And then again, I just sort of reflected on what ... means in English. And it means, hey, there's something more here, right? Like the rest of the story or whatever. I think we talked about that last week. And so here is an example from the language spec. The final parameter in a function signature may have a type prefix with ... So this is just illustrating variadic. So you can look at those. And then you could see the variadic arguments being passed in. So it's just talking about variadic parameters and variadic arguments. And so here we have some code, and we are doing what? We've got a func main that's calling another function greeting, and greeting's passing in 3 arguments, and they're all strings. And then greeting right here takes argument. The first one is a string, and it's called prefix, and the next one is going to be unlimited number of strings, and they're assigned to who. And so format println prefix gives us hello, and then if we use the 4 key value range to loop over who, we could print the value, throw away the key, and we get James and Jasmine. And so here is another way that we could do it, right? So before we had hello, James, Jasmine. Well, here I'm creating a variable type called a slice of strings. So slice is a list. We'll see this in a second. And I have 2 entries in that, and then I'm passing in that slice of strings. And here it says there's multiple things in there, right? That's what those ... dots mean. So multiple things in there. And so then I'm able to pass that in here that receives multiple things, multiple parameters, multiple arguments. And then the same thing, hello, James, Jasmine. And let's see. So instead of doing the dots, right, here I just said, hey, this takes a slice of strings. And I have a slice of strings, so I'm passing in a slice of strings. So I could do it this way, ... right? In which case I could take it like that, or like this. Or I could do it this way and pass in a slice of strings. So function 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And let's see, a slice of ints, and just playing with that more, right? So the function here takes in a variable number of parameters that are ints, and so we're passing it that way, or this way, and none at all, right? So none is valid. Back to the format package. So we already saw that. But there's sprint, and we already talked about sprint. And here's scan, and we saw an instance of scan being used, and we're taking what was received from the user at the command line and putting it into a memory address. So here's format sprint f, and here's using the f. So it takes the first arguments of formatting verb, and that's the %s.
If anyone's familiar with C, the percents are similar. They're in general the same as the C print stuff.
And you can look those up in the documentation. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. And there's like %v is the value in default format, %T is the type, %lowercase t is for Boolean true or false, and then %s is uninterpreted bytes of string or slice, %q is double quoted string safely escaped. And so here are all those being used, and you can see like %v gives me, you know, let's see, first we print hello world, and then we print the address, and then %v gives me hello world, and %t gives me the type string, and lowercase t gives me something funky, and then s gives me that again, and q gives me that again with quotes around it. Interesting. And %% will just print the %, so here I added over on the side what each of those are doing. The one I really like is %t, showing me the type. And there's Boolean at work. So %t showing me the bool. But %v is a pretty common default for the verbs. You might think about v, just verb, %v. And depending upon what you give it, you know, if you use %v, if it's a bool, it'll use %t. And you know, if it's a string, it uses %s and those different verbs. And you could also do this kind of stuff with width and precision. So, but good to know about if you've seen that stuff before. And so here's an example of width and precision, and that's just determining, you know, the width is field, and precision sets the number of places after the decimal. So width is how many, you know, characters do I want it wide to be, and precision is how many digits after the decimal. And so you can see that happening here. Like here I have a really big width, so it's made it 20 spaces, even though I'm maybe only using up 10 or 12 right there. And 5 decimal places, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So examples of other verbs can be found here, and they print out a lot of them. Scanning as an analogous set of functions, scans formatted text to yield value. Scan reads from OS standard in, and fscan, fscanf, and fscanline read from a specified I/O reader. I think about that as file scan. Would that be correct, Daniel? Fscan, fscanf, fscanline.
Yeah, pretty much.
From I/O reader, and then scan, scanf, or fscan read from the argument string. So scanline, fscanline, fscanline, and fscanline stop scanning a new line and require that the lines be followed by one. Scanf, fscanf, scanf require new lines in the input to match new lines in the format. The other routines treat new lines as spaces. F is in file, read from a specified I/O reader. I/O is an input-output. Stuff you know. So here's that scanf example we already saw. Sorry, scanline. I was reading, called the file scanf, but I'm using scanline. So an exercise to use that. I guess the main thing here is just understanding the difference between those different packages, and or the format package and the different functions, and then also what the verbs are.